Detroit burned quietly now, not with the roaring infernos of invasion or the screaming chaos of open war, but with the slow, choking fire of a civilization rotting from the inside out. Skyscrapers stood hollowed, their windows blacked out like dead eyes. Streets were ruled by armed neighborhoods, corporate mercenaries, and supes who treated entire blocks like personal playgrounds. Vaunt propaganda still flickered on massive hollow billboards, promising safety, unity, and strength, while blood dried in alleyways beneath smiling digital gods. Above it all, storm clouds churned unnaturally, thick and swollen, illuminated by distant lightning. Something tore through that sky. A black streak split the clouds like a wound, trailing sparks and feathers, slamming into the shattered roof of an abandoned cathedral on Detroit's east side. The impact didn't explode, it arrived. Stone buckled inward, dust rose in a slow, spiraling plume, and in the crater, a man lay broken. Long black hair matted with blood, white face paint cracked like porcelain, black leather burned and torn. A single black crow circled overhead, cawing once before landing on a fractured beam. If you want to see more characters enter the Boys universe, hit that subscribe button and drop a character name in the comments. May the Force be with you. Eric Draven should have stayed dead. 30 years ago, in another world, he had been murdered alongside the woman he loved. 30 years ago, he had crawled out of a grave driven by vengeance and guided by something older than death itself. That story had ended. This universe did not care. Lightning flashed. Eric's fingers twitched. The morgue technician had stopped asking questions years ago. Detroit's municipal morgue processed hundreds of bodies a week. Supes who overdosed on Compound V knockoffs, civilians caught in collateral damage, criminals who got too ambitious. Unidentified John Does were routine. The body on table 6 didn't bleed when they cut him, didn't rot, didn't smell, no pulse, no brain activity, but warm. Probably another freak, the technician muttered, snapping photos. Tag him, ship him to cold storage. The crow perched silently on a ceiling pipe. No one noticed it. When the drawer slid shut, darkness swallowed Eric whole. Inside that darkness, memories ignited. A woman's laugh, a rooftop in the rain, a gunshot, hands ripping at him, the sound of his own screaming. Then something else layered beneath the memories. Whispers, not voices, intent. A gravitational pull towards injustice, like a needle snapping towards magnetic north. Eric's eyes snapped open. Blackness reflected blackness. The crow's eyes glowed faintly through the darkness. The drawer dented outward. Metal screamed as something with inhuman strength punched from inside. The alarm went off 5 seconds later. By morning, Detroit police reported 2 dead security guards, 1 missing body, 1 symbol burned into a concrete wall near the loading bay, a crude drawing charred deep into stone. A crow. Vaunt classified the incident within 20 minutes. Homelander did not care. Not yet.
Eric wandered. Not aimlessly, never aimlessly. The city spoke to him. Pain left echoes, violence left residue. The crow guided him from shadow to shadow, rooftop to rooftop, sewer tunnels to abandoned tenements. Everywhere he went, suffering glowed like heat through fog. A woman beaten half to death by a low-level supe who sold protection to her landlord. Eric found him drinking in a derelict bowling alley, laughing with friends. The crow landed on a lane divider. Eric walked through bullets like rain. He broke the supe's jaw with 1 punch, pinned him to the floor. Memories flooded Eric's mind as his hand closed around the man's skull. Not Eric's memories, the supe's. Every woman, every bribe, every body. Eric whispered, "It can't rain all the time," then crushed his head. News of the death hit social media within an hour. Comments argued whether it was another gang war killing. One blurry phone video showed a tall figure in black leather standing over the corpse. The video cut out just as rings seemed to unfold from his back. Vought flagged it. Billy Butcher watched the footage 3 times, once normal speed, once slow motion, once frame by frame. He leaned back in his chair, chewing on an unlit cigarette. "That ain't any soup I've seen," he said. Mother's Milk crossed his arms. "Looks supernatural." Frenchie squinted at the paused frame. Or theatrical. Butcher smiled, a dangerous smile. Or useful. Eric did not sleep. He did not eat. He did not breathe. But he felt. Every crime tugged at him like a hook. Every scream echoed inside his skull. He learned quickly how this world worked. Corporations pretending to be gods, gods pretending to be heroes, monsters in capes. It wasn't that different from his old world, just louder, meaner, more honest about being broken. The Crow showed him Vought Tower from miles away, a black monolith stabbing into the clouds. Something inside that building pulsed wrong. Not just evil, systematic evil, industrialized cruelty. Eric knew he would go there, eventually. But first, a warehouse near the river, human trafficking, soups as enforcers. Eric entered through the roof. Gunfire erupted. Eric tore through them. Bones snapped, necks twisted, bullets flattened against his skin. One soup with pyrokinetic hands managed to set Eric on fire. Eric kept walking, burning, unstoppable. He impaled the soup on a forklift. The remaining traffickers ran. Eric let them. Fear spread faster than bodies. By dawn, Detroit whispered a new name, the Crow. Some said he was a demon. Some said he was a government weapon. Some said he hunted bad soups. Vought issued a public statement. An unidentified vigilante is being investigated. Citizens should avoid contact. Privately, they panicked because none of their databases matched him. No compound V signature, no thermal pattern, no heartbeat. He wasn't human, but he wasn't a soup, which meant something worse. On the 82nd floor of Vought Tower, Homelander finally noticed. A junior analyst, shaking, played the warehouse footage. Homelander tilted his head. Bullets bounce off him? Yes, sir. He kills soups? Yes, sir. Homelander smiled slowly. That's adorable. He leaned forward. Find him. Eric stood on the edge of a skyscraper that night. Rain soaked his coat. The Crow perched on his shoulder. The city stretched endlessly beneath him. So much pain, so many targets, but one burned brighter than all others, a blonde god with dead eyes. Eric did not know Homelander's name yet. He did not need to. The Crow spread its wings. Eric stepped off the building, not falling, descending, toward a war that didn't know it had begun.
The city did not greet legends with trumpets. It greeted them with rumors. Whispers passed through cracked lips in shelters and squats. Scratched messages appeared in subway tunnels. Graffiti bloomed overnight on ruined brick walls. A crude black crow, sometimes with a single word beneath it. Run. Criminals laughed at first, soups especially. They had grown up believing they were untouchable. Bullets were inconveniences. Knives were jokes. Civilians were furniture. The first real test came in a strip club off Jefferson Avenue that catered exclusively to soups. Behind velvet curtains and thumping bass, a mid-tier telekinetic named Grayson Pike ran an extortion ring. Girls disappeared. Families paid. Vought ignored it. Eric entered through the front door. Music kept playing. The bouncer fired point blank.
Eric caught the bullet, crushed it between two fingers. Silence swallowed the room. Someone laughed nervously. Then Eric moved. He crossed 20 feet in less than a second. His elbow shattered Pike's sternum. Telekinetic force slammed into Eric, hurling him through 3 walls. Eric stood up. Bones clicked back into place. Pike screamed. Eric grabbed his face. Images flooded Eric's mind. Children crying, money counting, a girl chained to a radiator. Eric whispered, "Guilty." He drove Pike's skull into the floor. Once, twice. The club erupted into chaos. Eric walked out as soups trampled each other trying to escape. By morning, every crime family in Detroit had heard. The Crow wasn't just real. He targeted soups first. Billy Butcher did not sleep that night. He had every recorded Crow incident pinned across a corkboard. Locations, victims, patterns. Always violent offenders, MM noted, never random. "He's got a bloody moral compass," Butcher said. Frenchie leaned closer. "Or he's playing a long con." Butcher shook his head. "Nah, look at the brutality. That ain't for show. That's personal." Huey, quiet until now, asked, "What if he's worse than them?" Butcher stared at the board. "Then we use him anyway." No one liked that, but no one argued. Vought's black site outside Cleveland activated Protocol Thanatos. Dr. Jonah Vogel, head of experimental biology, studied Eric's recovered blood sample. It didn't coagulate, didn't decay. Cells regenerated faster than they could be destroyed. "No compound V markers," Vogel muttered, "but energy readings are off the charts." "Magic?" an assistant asked. Vogel sneered. "There's no such thing." Then the crow on Vogel's windowsill tilted its head. The glass cracked. Vogel screamed as shadows swallowed the room. By the time security arrived, Vogel was dead, heart crushed inside his chest. No sign of forced entry, only a single black feather on the floor. Vought buried the report. Homelander read it. Homelander smiled. Eric learned the rules of this universe through blood. Soups came in tiers. Street tier, arrogant, sloppy. Corporate tier, careful, protected. God tier, rare. He could tear through the first 2 easily. The third burned differently. Eric felt it the first time Homelander flew overhead, a pressure like gravity doubling. The crow screeched. Eric looked up. For half a second their eyes met across miles of polluted sky. Homelander kept flying, but his smile faded. Butcher made the first move. A burner phone slid across an alley floor while Eric stood over a dying arms dealer. The crow cocked its head. Eric picked up the phone. A distorted voice spoke. "You hate soups." Eric said nothing. "So do we." Silence. "We can point you toward the worst ones." Eric replied softly. "I don't take orders." A pause. "Didn't ask you to, only offering information." Eric crushed the phone, but the crow did not fly away.
Homelander appeared on live television 3 days later, standing beside Vought's logo. All smiles. "We are aware of the so-called Crow Killer," Homelander said. "Vought is handling it. There is no cause for concern." Behind the scenes, Homelander vaporized a PR executive for suggesting caution. He wanted the Crow, not dead, broken, on his knees, begging, because Homelander had never met something that did not fear him, and he hated it. Eric stood inside an abandoned church that night. Candles burned without being lit. Stained glass depicted angels with broken faces. The crow perched atop a crucifix. Eric knelt, not in prayer, in memory. Shelley. Her name echoed endlessly. The crow showed him flashes, Vaught labs, men in suits, soups being created, children injected. Eric realized something terrifying. This world manufactured monsters, endlessly. Killing individuals would never be enough. The system itself had to bleed. A choice was forming.
and Eric did not yet know which side of it he would fall on. Outside, thunder rolled. Somewhere far above, Homelander hovered in the clouds, listening. The hunt was mutual now.
The first time Eric Draven saw Vought Tower in person, it reminded him of a mausoleum pretending to be a cathedral. Polished black glass, perfect angles, a monument to corporate worship. People lined up outside, cheering, waving miniature American flags, begging for selfies with B-list soups stationed as security. They had no idea they were praying at the altar of their own executioners. Eric stood across the street, hood pulled low, rain sliding down his face paint like black tears. The crow circled once. Inside Vought Tower, 28 separate surveillance systems locked onto Eric simultaneously. None of them could identify what he was. That terrified Vought more than any confirmed enemy ever had. In Sublevel 42, Dr. Miriam Cross reviewed data on a holographic display. Energy anomalies, cellular regeneration curves, thermal patterns that defied physics. "She isn't a soup," she said quietly. The executives around her exchanged uneasy looks. "He's something else." One of them swallowed. "Can we kill him?" Cross hesitated. "We don't know how." That single sentence triggered funding approvals worth billions, not to destroy Eric, to replicate him. Butcher felt it in his gut when Vought went quiet. No public statements, no press leaks, no bounty announcements. "They're cooking something," he muttered. Nodded, which means Crow's already in their crosshairs. Huey frowned. "Should we warn him?" Butcher didn't answer, because Butcher didn't know if he wanted Eric alive. He wanted Homelander dead more. Everything else was secondary. Eric moved before Vought finished building their cage. A Vought-run rehabilitation center outside Dearborn housed dozens of unstable soups deemed too dangerous for PR, but too valuable to discard. Officially, therapy. In reality, containment. Eric entered through the underground drainage system, concrete tunnels, dripping water, rats fleeing ahead of him. 2 armored guards died before their radios hit the floor. Inside, Eric found rows of glass cells. Some soups laughed, some screamed, some begged. The crow landed on a control panel. A young woman with glowing blue veins pressed her hands to the glass. "They hurt us, please." Eric hesitated. Not all monsters chose to be monsters. He ripped open the cells. Chaos erupted. Some soups ran, some attacked guards, some attacked each other. Eric moved like a shadow through the storm. He killed only those who preyed on the helpless. One teleporter tried to escape. Eric grabbed his arm mid-jump, ripped it off. The teleporter bled out, screaming. Eric didn't flinch. The woman with glowing veins stood frozen. "Why help us?" she asked. Eric answered, "Because someone should have helped me." Alarms screamed, sprinklers activated, fire suppression foam filled corridors. Eric walked out as military helicopters descended. By morning, 12 guards were dead, 7 soups escaped. Vought labeled it a terrorist attack. Privately, they called it an existential threat. Homelander arrived at the destroyed facility hours later. He hovered above the cratered roof, sniffed the air. Something unfamiliar lingered. Not fear, not awe. Purpose. It made his skin crawl. "Find him," Homelander said. "I don't care how many bodies it takes." Eric began to feel something new. Resistance. Not from bullets, not from blades, from inside himself. Each resurrection took something. He healed slower. Not slow, but slower than before. The crow watched him closely. Eric understood. He was not infinite. He was a candle burning backward. Bright, brief. That knowledge sharpened him. No wasted movements, no pointless kills. Every action had to matter. Butcher tracked Eric to the ruins of the rehab center. He stood among the corpses, hands on hips. "Bloody hell," he muttered.
Frenchie crouched beside a torn steel door. "Strength comparable to Soldier Boy," he said, "but different." Looked uneasy. "He freed people." Butcher lit his cigarette. "Doesn't make him a hero." Huey stared at the black feather stuck in concrete. "Doesn't make him a villain either." Butcher exhaled smoke. "Which makes him dangerous." That night, Eric stood atop a water tower overlooking a homeless encampment. Children slept inside broken school buses. Armed volunteers patrolled with hunting rifles. Soups sometimes raided the camp for sport. Eric stayed. All night. 2 soups came. Neither left. By dawn, the camp had a new legend. A black angel. A protector. Eric didn't want worship, but symbols grew whether he allowed them or not. The crow cawed softly. Eric whispered, "I'm not your god." The crow tilted its head, as if to say, "Neither are they." Far away, Homelander watched a satellite feed of Eric standing in the rain. For the first time in years, Homelander felt something unfamiliar twist in his chest. Not rage, not boredom, uncertainty. And that terrified him.
The myth stopped belonging to the streets the moment Homelander spoke the word hunt. It started quietly, not with sirens or televised declarations, but with shadows moving where no shadows should exist. Vought Black Ops teams began disappearing. Recon drones vanished mid-flight. Entire surveillance vans were found melted into slag, cameras still recording static when retrieved. Someone was killing the hunters, and someone was enjoying it. Eric Draven felt them before he saw them, a pressure at the base of his skull, a distortion in the city's pain patterns, violence that did not originate from desperation or cruelty, but from intent, trained intent. He stood atop a half-collapsed parking garage overlooking Corktown, rain soaking through his coat, Crow perched on a rusted rebar spike beside him. Below, 6 men in civilian clothes pretended to be drunk outside a closed bar. Their heartbeats were steady, their breathing synchronized, their pain signatures were cold. Soldiers. Eric dropped. He landed between them without sound. The first man reached for a pistol. Eric punched through his sternum. A second raised a shock baton. Eric snapped his wrist backward until bone punched through skin. The remaining 4 opened fire. Eric walked forward. Bullets flattened against his ribs. One man screamed. Eric grabbed his head. Memory spilled. Vought training compound. Orders: capture the Crow alive. Containment unit inbound. Eric crushed his skull. He did not wait for the rest. He moved. 30 seconds later, only bodies remained. The Crow circled overhead, then landed on Eric's shoulder. Eric whispered, "They're afraid now." The Crow cawed once. Not afraid enough. Inside Vought Tower, panic hid behind corporate smiles. Dr. Miriam Cross watched security footage of the ambush failing. "She's adapting," she said. CEO Ashley Barrett rubbed her temples. "We need something bigger." Homelander sat at the end of the table, boots on polished wood. "I don't want him dead." Ashley swallowed. "Why?" Homelander's eyes gleamed. "I want him broken." Butcher felt the escalation before anyone told him. His contacts went dark. Dead drops stopped answering. Black market chatter turned frantic. "They're mobilizing," Butcher said. Looked up from his tablet. "Vought?" "Vought. Homeland Security, private militaries, everyone who owes Vought favors." Frenchie grimaced. "They're building an army." Butcher smiled thinly. "Good." Huey stared at him. "Good? Means the Crow's scaring the right people." Eric moved deeper into enemy territory, not randomly, targeted. He followed supply chains, weapons shipments, transport routes.
The crow showed him patterns. One warehouse in particular glowed like a cancer. Eric breached at 0214. Inside, rows of steel pods lined the floor. Each contained a sedated soup, IV lines, monitors, neural dampeners, a production line. Eric tore open a pod. A teenage boy fell out, coughing. "What is this place?" the boy asked. Eric answered, "A farm." Gunfire erupted. Vought strike team, heavily armored, energy rifles. Eric charged. A plasma round burned a hole through his shoulder. He stumbled. The crow screeched. Eric ripped the round out. Flesh knitted. Slowly. Slower than before. Eric still won, but it took longer. He felt every hit, every fracture. By the time the last soldier fell, Eric was on one knee. The crow hopped closer. Eric whispered, "I'm running out." The crow stared back, as if to say, "So choose carefully." Eric looked at the pods, at dozens of sleeping soups who would become weapons. He triggered the fire suppression system, then overloaded the reactor. He carried as many out as he could. When the explosion came, the warehouse collapsed into a burning sinkhole. 30 soups escaped, hundreds of millions in assets lost. Vought stock dipped 6% in after-hours trading. Homelander punched a hole through a conference room wall.
Butcher watched news footage of the explosion. Jesus! Shook his head. He's not just killing anymore, he's dismantling infrastructure. Huey said quietly, "He's trying to end it." Butcher didn't respond, because part of him hated that idea. If Eric ended it, what would Butcher have left? Homelander finally made his first direct move, not with fists, with theater. He appeared hovering above a refugee camp in Cleveland, live cameras everywhere. "We are offering sanctuary," Homelander said warmly. "Come forward, Vought will protect you." The crowd hesitated. Then Eric landed in the middle of them. Gasps rippled outward. Homelander smiled down at him. "There you are." Eric looked up. They stared at each other. Two symbols, two myths, two completely different meanings. Homelander descended slowly. "I've heard you think you're some kind of judge." Eric said nothing. Homelander leaned closer. "I'm the only judge here." Homelander punched Eric through 3 buildings. Eric crashed into a collapsed subway tunnel. Concrete buried him. Homelander hovered above the rubble. "Stay down." The rubble exploded. Eric rose, bleeding, burning, smiling faintly. Eric whispered, "It can't rain all the time." Homelander felt something snap. He attacked. They traded blows that shattered streets. Eric's bones broke. He reformed. Homelander bled, for the first time in years. Sirens wailed. Civilians ran. Homelander finally grabbed Eric by the throat and flew upward, slamming him into the side of a skyscraper. "You're not immortal," Homelander snarled. Eric coughed black blood. "Neither are you." Homelander ripped Eric in half, literally, tore him from shoulder to hip. Homelander dropped both halves. He hovered there, breathing hard, smiling. Below, the crow screamed. The two halves twitched. Black smoke coiled. Flesh pulled together. Bones knitted. Eric stood back up, whole. Homelander's smile died. For the first time in his existence, Homelander felt fear. Eric did not pursue. He turned, walked away, leaving Homelander hovering alone in the rain. The message was clear. This wasn't a duel. It was a war of attrition, and Eric intended to outlast him.
Fear did not explode across the world. It seeped like water into cracked concrete. Slow, unstoppable. By the time Vought admitted it had lost control of the narrative no longer belonged to them. Cell phone footage of Homelander bleeding went viral. Blurry, shaky. Half the world called it fake. The other half didn't care, because doubt alone was enough. Homelander had always been absolute, perfect, untouchable. Now there was a crack in the godhood, and cracks spread. Eric Draven felt the shift immediately. Not in headlines, not in social media metrics, in the city's pain. People were still suffering, but beneath the suffering was something new. Hope. Fragile. Dangerous. Hope made people reckless. Hope made people brave. Hope got people killed. Eric moved carefully now. Every action echoed farther than before. The crow stayed close, perched on his shoulder, watching, measuring, almost judging. Vought's response was not restraint, it was evolution. Dr. Miriam Cross stood inside a subterranean lab beneath Vought Tower. Rows of restraints, chains, magnetic fields. At the center of the room, a man hung suspended. Gray skin, sunken eyes, veins glowing faint purple. Subject Lazarus 9, a failed resurrection experiment. They had injected Compound V into a corpse, then bombarded it with energy readings stolen from Eric's blood sample. The result did not wake, it twitched. "Begin neural stimulation," Cross said. Electrodes fired. Lazarus 9's eyes snapped open. He screamed. The lights flickered. Cross smiled. "We don't need to understand him," she whispered. "We just need to copy him." Butcher watched leaked schematics on a cracked tablet. Frenchie had pulled them from a dead Vought engineer's phone. "Resurrection research," Frenchie said. "They're trying to build their own crow." MM rubbed his face. "That's a nightmare." Butcher stared at Eric's symbol on the wall. "Means they're desperate." Huey asked, "Should we warn him?" Butcher hesitated. "A rare thing." "He already knows," Butcher said. He didn't know how he knew, but he did. Eric felt Lazarus 9 the moment it woke. Not visually, not audibly. A wrongness in the fabric of pain itself, like a distorted echo of his own existence. Eric staggered. The crow screeched. Eric whispered, "They're copying me." The crow tilted its head, as if to ask, "What will you do about it?" Eric changed course. The lab beneath Vought Tower was a fortress, layers of biometric locks, soup guards, automated turrets. Eric entered through the sewer, dark water up to his knees. He emerged beneath the facility, cracked a maintenance hatch, silenced 2 guards, advanced. Alarms triggered anyway, they always did. Eric stopped caring. He tore through security. Walls collapsed, fire blossomed. Eric reached the central chamber. Lazarus 9 hung screaming, a thing in agony. Not evil, not innocent, just broken. Eric locked eyes with it and saw something horrifying. Lazarus 9 was conscious, trapped inside a body that wouldn't obey, trapped inside endless pain. Eric whispered, "I'm sorry." He tore the machine apart, pulled Lazarus 9 free. The creature collapsed into Eric's arms. Hands clawed weakly at Eric's coat. "Kill me." Eric hesitated. Mercy or murder. The crow remained silent. Eric closed Lazarus 9's eyes, snapped its neck. The screaming stopped. Eric planted explosives, left. The lab vanished in a pillar of fire.
Homelander arrived too late. Again. He hovered over the smoking crater. Ashley's voice screamed through his earpiece. "Investors are panicking." Homelander crushed the communicator. "I don't care." Homelander stared into the ruins. "This is mine." Eric retreated into abandoned subway tunnels beneath Detroit. His body felt heavy. He sat against a concrete wall. Blood seeped from cracks in his skin. The crow hopped closer. Eric whispered, "How many times can I die?" The crow did not answer. Eric closed his eyes. He dreamed. Not of Shelley, not of his murder. He dreamed of the boy from the pod, of the glowing vein woman,
of homeless kids sleeping safely for one night. Eric realized something. He wasn't driven purely by revenge anymore. He was choosing who deserved his last breaths. That scared him more than Homelander ever could. Butcher stood on a rooftop watching Detroit burn faintly on the horizon. Joined him. "He's changing things," said. Butcher nodded. "Yeah." Waited. Butcher finally said, "Which means Vought will escalate to something ugly." Asked, "And us?" Butcher smiled thinly. "We decide which monster wins." Homelander made his decision that same night. He didn't announce it, didn't broadcast it, didn't posture. He flew straight toward Detroit, toward the Crow, toward the thing that dared exist outside his control. The sky darkened, thunder rolled. Two inevitable forces were moving toward collision, and one of them was already dying.
Rain fell like shards of glass, slicing through broken streets and puddles tainted with oil and blood. Detroit's skyline, jagged and fractured, seemed to shiver beneath the weight of anticipation. Eric Draven moved silently along the rooftops, Crow perched on his shoulder, scanning the chaos below. Every sound, every flicker of light carried significance. Every drop of rain seemed to whisper, "Choose carefully." He had learned the hard way that in this universe, patience was a weapon. Soups were predictable, corporate operatives were predictable, but Homelander was chaos draped in perfection. Eric had faced death before, but facing something that didn't fear death, something that bent the world's rules to its whim, was a lesson in strategy, not brutality. Below, streets teemed with fear and opportunity. Rogue soups tried to exploit the confusion Eric had seeded. Thieves, pimps, corrupt law enforcement, all scrambling to protect themselves from a storm they didn't understand. Eric didn't stop them unless their cruelty demanded it. Justice was precise, swift, absolute. Vought Tower's sensors flared. Homelander hovered above, scanning for his prey. The skyscraper shone like a beacon, every window reflecting his golden arrogance. Eric knew this confrontation was inevitable, but he also knew the fight would not be won by strength alone. Tactics mattered, timing mattered, subtlety mattered. Eric slipped into an abandoned subway station. Graffiti marked the walls. The Crow watches. Shadows lengthened unnaturally as he advanced, the Crow circling above like a black halo. Suddenly, a pulse of energy hit, a Compound V-infused soup patrol scanning the tunnels. Eric sidestepped, letting the blast tear through the wall behind him. Dust and rubble rained down, and the Crow's caw echoed like a warning. Eric's hands glowed faintly with residual energy from prior encounters. Not a superpower, but a connection to the city's pain, the sorrow of the countless innocents whose lives had been destroyed by Vought and its soups. The energy guided him, heightened his reflexes, made him more than human without granting him arrogance. Meanwhile, in a black SUV above street level, Butcher, Frenchie, and Huey observed Eric's movements. "Bloody hell," Butcher muttered. "He's like a walking nightman dressed in leather." Frenchie adjusted his scope. And yet, precise, not random chaos, he has a code. Frowned. "Which makes him unpredictable. That's worse." Huey swallowed. "We need to decide, help him or stay out." Butcher didn't answer. He simply lit a cigarette. Smoke curled into the rainy night air. "We wait and watch, because when he and Homelander collide, the world will shift, one way or another." Eric emerged from the subway tunnels into a desolate industrial yard. Broken machinery littered the ground. Rusted shipping containers formed a labyrinth. He moved like a shadow, every step calculated. The Crow's caw sliced the silence. A patrol of 3 soups appeared, each enhanced with Compound V strength. They thought they could overwhelm him with brute force. They didn't count on instinct honed over decades, on death that refused to accept defeat.
Eric disarmed the first within 2 seconds, snapping the reinforced steel baton like a twig. He used the second as a shield against the third, driving them both into a container wall. Bones shattered, flesh tore. The crow circled, observing, almost approvingly. By the time Homelander arrived overhead, Eric was ready.
Homelander's descent was silent until the last moment. Then, with a roar that split the clouds, he slammed into the ground, sending debris flying in all directions. Eric didn't flinch. He had faced death before, and this was a predator, not an executioner. "You're bold," Homelander said, voice amplified over the rain. "But bold doesn't last." Eric's eyes, black and storm-filled, met his. "Neither do you." They collided, fists and energy clashed with bone-jarring force. Concrete cracked under the weight of their blows. Electricity arced from fractured power lines. Windows shattered. Homelander unleashed his heat vision, scorching the ground near Eric's feet. Eric dodged, felt the heat singe his coat, and countered with precise strikes to Homelander's ribs and shoulders. Every strike was calculated, every movement intentional. Eric did not aim to kill, he aimed to survive, to test, to measure. Homelander recoiled, unaccustomed to resistance of this magnitude. The battle escalated. Homelander's fury increased as Eric adapted instantly to every attack. Eric's regenerative abilities, though slower than in his original world, kept him moving, dodging, striking, enduring. Pain sharpened his focus. The crow swooped and dove, confusing Homelander's line of sight. Shadows became allies. At one point, Homelander slammed Eric through a factory wall. Dust and rubble buried him. The crowd of terrified civilians below screamed. But Eric emerged seconds later, coated in grime, blood mixing with rain, a living testament to relentless survival. Homelander hovered, rage and confusion warring in his expression. He had destroyed entire cities before. He had crushed heroes, villains, and civilians alike. And yet, Eric Draven was still standing. From a distance, Butcher and his team watched the confrontation. "This is insane," Huey muttered, voice barely audible. Frenchie nodded, "and beautiful in a terrifying way." MM swallowed. "He's holding his own against a god." Butcher exhaled smoke, eyes narrowing. "He's not just holding his own, he's rewriting the rules. That's what makes him dangerous. That's what makes him useful." Rain fell harder. Lightning split the sky. The city trembled under the weight of godlike confrontation. Eric knew he could not keep this up forever. Every strike brought him closer to exhaustion. Every regenerative effort drained something essential. Yet he would not falter. The innocent depended on it. The crow landed on a nearby steel beam, watching intently. Eric's gaze followed it. A choice had to be made. He could continue the fight, risking everything, or he could strategize, draw Homelander into a position where the advantage shifted subtly, toward him. Eric made his choice. He darted behind a stack of shipping containers, forcing Homelander to overcommit. Homelander smashed into steel, momentarily stunned. Eric struck from the shadows, hitting precisely, striking with strength and intent, unrelenting. This was not mere vengeance, it was a lesson, a warning, a symbol. Homelander, enraged and bleeding lightly for the first time, realized something terrifying. This was not a skirmish, this was a war, and he was not in control. Night fell fully, swallowing Detroit in shadows and rain-soaked streets. The city trembled not from the storm, but from the quiet power struggle that now dominated the skyline. Eric Draven moved like a phantom, his coat slicked with rain, the crow perched on his shoulder, scanning the rooftops for any sign of danger. The city whispered beneath him, every creaking beam and shattered window echoing stories of fear and survival. Vought Tower's black lights pierced the darkness, a testament to corporate omnipotence. Inside, Homelander's fury simmered. He hovered above a digital map projected in holographic blue, tracking every incident Eric had touched over the past 72 hours. "He's everywhere," Homelander muttered, slamming a fist into the steel console. Sparks flew, screens cracked, and he's changing things. At street level, Butcher and his team observed Eric's movements through hacked VOT feeds. Frenchie adjusted his scope, eyes narrowed. He's faster than last time, smarter, more precise. Frowned, tapping his tablet. He's learning their systems, anticipating the traps before they even lay them. Huey shifted uneasily. He's not just a killer, he's evolving. Butcher exhaled smoke, lips curling. Dangerous is just a word. Crow, he's survival incarnate. Let him do his thing. Eric paused atop a crumbling overpass, rain streaming down his face. Below, a convoy of VOT-armored vehicles approached, carrying soups enhanced with Compound V and experimental augmentations. Eric's eyes narrowed, black as the night around him. He could have obliterated them instantly, but this wasn't about brute force anymore. It was about strategy. The first soup, a hulking figure with reinforced limbs, charged. Eric sidestepped, letting momentum carry the attacker into a stack of containers, crushing metal and flesh alike. The second soup fired an energy cannon. Eric dove behind a support beam as the blast carved a trench through the concrete. He struck from the shadows, snapping necks, disarming energy weapons, moving with surgical precision. Lightning struck overhead, illuminating the crow as it circled above. Eric leapt, using the containers as cover, striking again and again. Each kill was exact, leaving survivors terrified, but alive enough to carry fear into the streets. By the time the last soup hit the ground, the convoy had been reduced to wreckage and chaos. Homelander arrived moments later, descending from the storm clouds with terrifying grace. Rain pelted his golden armor as he landed in the middle of the destroyed street, surveying the carnage with a mixture of fury and fascination. "Impressive," he said, voice booming, "but impressive doesn't last." Eric emerged from the shadows, body battered but moving steadily, the crow perched as if it were the balance point in this world. "Neither does tyranny," he replied, voice low, resonant with pain and purpose. The confrontation escalated immediately. Homelander's fists, faster than bullets, slammed into Eric, throwing him through debris and concrete. Eric's regeneration slowed, every movement costing him more than before. Still he rose, still he fought. Every strike, every counter was calculated, precise, a dance of survival and principle. Butcher and his team watched from a distance, hearts pounding. "He's not winning," muttered but he's not losing either. Frenchie adjusted his scope, voice tinged with awe. "He's redefining the fight. Each encounter teaches him, makes him stronger." Huey swallowed. "Is that good?" Butcher's eyes never left the screen. "It has to be, because if he falters, we're screwed." Meanwhile, civilians peered from shattered windows, whispering the name that had begun to spread like wildfire. The Crow. Fear, reverence, and hope tangled together in their voices. Eric had become more than a man, more than a legend, a symbol, a reckoning. Eric realized something terrifying mid-fight. This wasn't a duel. Homelander had strength, but he lacked the code, the morality, the connection to the suffering that fueled Eric. Each strike from Homelander was raw, devastating, but blind. Eric's power was not in his fists alone. It was in the calculated precision, the intent, and the endurance born of pain and purpose. The Crow cawed sharply, drawing Eric's attention to the east. A group of VOT reinforcements approached, experimental soups ready for combat. Eric made a split-second decision. He could fight Homelander now, or draw him into a trap where numbers would matter less than strategy. He sprinted across rooftops, using every shadow, every ruined structure, every fragment of terrain to his advantage. Homelander pursued relentlessly, smashing walls and pillars, but Eric was always just beyond reach. He dropped explosive charges at key points, collapsing beams onto incoming soups, creating barriers and chaos. Every step, every action was an orchestration of survival and warning. By the time Eric reached an abandoned industrial complex near the river, he paused. His body was exhausted, wounds beginning to slow regeneration. He had survived countless attacks, torn through Vought's elite, and faced Homelander himself, yet the battle was far from over. The choice ahead was clear: continue a direct assault on Homelander, risking everything, or strategically dismantle Vought's system to limit Homelander's power permanently. Eric's eyes met the Crow's gaze, silent counsel, unspoken. A choice had to be made, one that would define the remainder of his existence in this world, one that carried moral weight, strategic consequence, and personal cost. The storm above raged, lightning illuminated the ruined city, rain poured. The battle for Detroit and for the fate of the world's soups was about to reach its next stage. The industrial complex smelled of rust, rain, and lingering smoke from fires that had burned out hours earlier. Broken machinery, shattered glass, and twisted metal littered the ground like trophies of chaos. Eric Draven crouched in the shadows, coat soaked, breathing steady despite the pounding adrenaline. The Crow perched silently above, wings twitching with anticipation. He could feel it, the tension in the city, the ripple in the pain he absorbed, the unspoken warnings in every echoing footstep. Detroit itself had become a weapon, and Eric its conductor. Homelander appeared above the complex like a storm given flesh. Rain glistened off his golden armor, and the air vibrated with his presence. He hovered silently at first, observing, calculating. Then his voice cut through the storm. "I've waited long enough, Crow. Stand and fight, or run like the rest of them." Eric did not answer immediately. Every move had consequences. Every strike had a purpose. He watched as Homelander's gaze swept the terrain, noting weak points, escape routes, and potential leverage. This was a battlefield, not a duel, and he intended to control every inch of it. The first clash was brutal. Homelander struck with the speed of lightning, sending Eric crashing through reinforced steel beams. Pain lanced through his body, slowed by regeneration but not erased. Eric rolled, launched himself from the wreckage and countered with precision strikes. Homelander blocked with golden forearms, but Eric's blows landed on vulnerable joints, chipping away at his godlike composure. Above, the Crows swooped, disorienting Homelander with flapping wings and shadowed movements. Rain slicked the surfaces, providing Eric subtle traction for flips and strikes. Every attack carried purpose, every movement a lesson in adaptation. Homelander was powerful, but predictable when faced with a force that read pain and consequence rather than brute strength. Eric's strategy became apparent. He was not trying to kill Homelander outright, that would be suicide. Instead, he aimed to destabilize him, draw him into a sequence of tactical traps and psychological warfare. Explosives previously planted around the complex ignited in a calculated cascade. Homelander dodged some, was partially hindered by others, and Eric used every delay to press attacks, exploiting the slightest opening. Meanwhile, Vought Command monitored the escalating chaos. Dr. Miriam Cross and her team observed in horror as their controlled experiment, a godlike enforcer, struggled against a single man guided by instinct, purpose, and a near supernatural connection to suffering. Communications crackled as panic filtered upward. "He's destabilizing our assets," an operator screamed. "We can't contain him." From the shadows, Butcher and his team watched, hearts hammering. "This is insane," Huey muttered. Frenchie nodded, voice low. "He's rewriting the rules of engagement." MM's hands tightened on his tablet. And yet, he's still human enough to have mercy. Butcher, cigarette smoldering between his fingers, smiled thinly. "Mercy isn't weakness, it's leverage. Crow's playing a game we can barely see, and that makes him deadly."
From the shadows, Butcher and his team watched, hearts hammering. "This is insane," Huey muttered. Frenchie nodded, voice low. He's rewriting the rules of engagement. MM's hands tightened on his tablet. And yet, he's still human enough to have mercy. Butcher, cigarette smoldering between his fingers, smiled thinly. Mercy isn't weakness, it's leverage. Crow's playing a game we can barely see, and that makes him deadly. The fight reached its peak when Homelander, enraged and frustrated by Eric's resilience, struck a massive steel support beam, sending a cascade of rubble downward. Eric rolled through the debris, narrowly avoiding impalement, and struck with uncanny precision at Homelander's chest plate. A crack appeared, a minor one, but enough to unbalance the soup. Eric exploited it immediately, striking joints, displacing weight, and forcing Homelander back toward an area rigged with controlled explosions. Each detonation was measured, creating barriers, limiting Homelander's movements, but avoiding collateral civilian casualties. Eric's moral compass guided his tactics. He fought to protect, not just punish. Hours of battle passed as the storm raged overhead. Rain blurred vision, thunder masked sound, and lightning eliminated fleeting glimpses of two forces unmatched in their ferocity. Each strike Eric made drained him incrementally. Every regenerative effort demanded concentration and energy. Homelander, though a god to the world, began to falter, frustrated by the relentless precision and unpredictability of his opponent. Eric realized the critical moment had arrived. He could either continue a drawn-out engagement that risked his own diminishing limits, or lure Homelander into a situation where his own power imbalance became irrelevant. He chose the latter. Using the terrain to his advantage, Eric drew Homelander across weakened structures, bridges, and pre-planted hazards. Explosions, debris, and collapsing scaffolds restricted Homelander's aerial freedom, forcing the soup into confined spaces where brute strength became less useful. Eric struck relentlessly, testing, probing, and controlling each moment with deliberate precision. Homelander roared, fury echoing across the industrial wasteland. "You think you can trap me?" Eric's response was quiet, resolute. "I know I can survive you." The crow circled once, twice, cawing sharply. It was both herald and witness. Eric's shadow moved in synchrony with the rain, the storm, and the city's pulse, a single, unstoppable force against the golden tyrant above. By dawn, the industrial complex lay in ruins. Homelander, battered and disoriented, hovered above, fury and fear etched into his features for the first time in decades. Eric Draven stood among the wreckage, bloodied but whole, rain washing away soot and grime. He had not defeated Homelander, but he had survived. He had set the stage. He had established dominion over the chaos, demonstrating that even gods could be challenged. From afar, Butcher and his team exhaled collectively. "He did it," MM whispered. "Not the kill, the message." Frenchie nodded. "A symbol of choice, not just power." Huey's eyes glistened. "He's changing everything." Butcher remained silent, cigarette dangling. His mind raced with calculations and possibilities. Eric's fight was far from over, but Detroit, and perhaps the world, had been reminded that fear was not absolute.
Dawn arrived like a hesitant apology. Not bright, not warm, just a thin gray smear across the horizon, bleeding slowly into the smoke-choked sky. Detroit looked less like a city and more like the aftermath of a fallen empire. Collapsed bridges, burning warehouses, blackened streets carved by impact craters. And at the center of it all stood Eric Draven, not victorious, not triumphant, simply unbroken. Rain slid down his face paint, carrying streaks of diluted black that resembled tears. The crow perched on a bent light pole behind him, feathers slick and heavy, eyes locked on the golden figure hovering 50 feet above the wreckage. Homelander. Bruised, blood streaking from a cut along his jaw, armor cracked, breathing harder than he ever had on camera. The world had never seen this version of him. Neither had Homelander himself. For the first time in his existence, Homelander felt something gnawing at the edges of his mind. Not rage, not arrogance, not hunger. Doubt. Eric felt it too. He felt Homelander's doubt like static against his skin. A god who had discovered he could bleed. A tyrant realizing his throne was built on perception, and perception had just cracked. They did not charge. They did not speak. They simply stared. Two symbols, two philosophies. Absolute dominance, relentless consequence. Eric knew something Homelander did not. This fight was never about killing him. Killing Homelander would make him a martyr, a symbol for monsters to rally around. A vacuum Vought would fill with something worse. What Eric needed to kill was inevitability. Miles away, deep beneath Vought Tower, Dr. Miriam Cross stood inside the final containment wing. Project Phoenix. Not Lazarus, not prototypes, the real attempt. Dozens of suspended bodies, all dead, all infused with experimental compound V variants spliced with fragments of Eric's regenerative data. An assembly line for artificial resurrection. Vaught's answer to mortality. Vaught's path to godhood. Cross whispered, "If we cannot control the Crow," she swallowed, "we replace him." The system powered up. Monitors spiked. One pod twitched, then another, then 3 more. Cross smiled and did not notice the black feather drifting down behind her. Eric turned his back on Homelander, slowly, deliberately. Homelander blinked, confused. "You're walking away?" Homelander shouted. Eric did not stop. "It doesn't matter what I think," Eric said quietly. "It matters what they see." He stepped into the shadows and vanished. Homelander hovered there, surrounded by destruction, with nothing left to punch, nothing left to dominate. Only witnesses, cameras, cell phones, people watching and seeing him not as a god, but as something that could be challenged. Homelander screamed. The sound shattered windows for miles, but it did not erase what had been seen.
Eric moved with purpose. Not rage, not vengeance. Purpose. The Crow guided him back toward Vought Tower, toward the cancer at the core. Butcher intercepted him in an abandoned rail tunnel. No guns raised, no threats, just 4 humans standing in the dark. Butcher stepped forward. "All right, mate, cords on the table." Eric's eyes flicked to each of them, assessing, measuring. "Butcher," Eric said. Butcher stiffened. "You know me?" Eric tilted his head. "I know pain." Butcher swallowed. "You're heading for Vault?" "Yes." "You planning on burning it down?" Eric shook his head. "I'm ending the factory." Stepped forward. "The Resurrection Labs." Eric nodded. Frenchie exhaled. "Mon Dieu." Huey asked, "If you do this, you know they'll come for you with everything they have." Eric answered calmly, "They already are." Butcher stared at him. "You won't survive that." Eric met his eyes. "I don't need to." Silence filled the tunnel. Heavy. Final. Butcher finally said, "We can get you inside." Eric studied him. "Why?" Butcher laughed bitterly. "Because I've spent my whole life trying to kill one monster." He shrugged. "You're trying to stop them from making more." Eric extended his hand. Butcher shook it. A pact. Not of friendship, not of trust, of aligned hatred. They moved that night. Sewer routes, maintenance shafts, dead zones in Vaught's surveillance grid. Frenchie worked miracles. Kept watch. Huey jammed signals. Eric led. They reached sub-level 80, Project Phoenix. The doors were thicker than anything Eric had seen. Layered alloy, energy shields,
Biometric locks. Eric placed his palm against the metal. Pain flooded him. Not physical, spiritual. Thousands of deaths, hundreds of experiments, dreams of immortality built on corpses. Eric screamed. The crow shrieked. The doors buckled, exploded inward. Inside, rows of suspended corpses, machines humming, monitors alive with impossible data. Dr. Miriam Cross turned slowly. "Oh," she whispered, "you're beautiful." Eric walked forward. Cross raised a remote. "With one command, I can wake them all." Eric stopped. This was the choice. Kill her now, end the threat, or risk something worse. Cross smiled. "Kill me, and the system auto-activates." Eric's jaw tightened. Morally complex. No clean answer. Eric looked at the crow. The crow did not move. Eric closed his eyes and shot the ceiling. Water pipes ruptured. High-voltage conduits sparked. The entire chamber began to flood. Systems shorted. Pods shattered. Electricity surged. Cross screamed as a cable whipped around her neck. The lights went out. When emergency power kicked in, every pod was dark, every monitor dead. Project Phoenix was gone. Cross lay dead, not executed, not judged, erased by her own creation. Eric collapsed to one knee. His body shook violently. The crow fluttered down onto his shoulder. Eric whispered, "It's done." But he knew better. It wasn't over, not really. But something irreversible had happened. Vought had lost its future. Homelander had lost his myth, and the world had gained a symbol it could not unsee. Eric Draven stood, bloodied, cracked, still alive, barely. He turned toward the darkness beyond the lab, toward whatever remained.
The explosion never came. There was no towering fireball, no cinematic collapse of Vought Tower, no thunderous announcement that evil had been vanquished. Because real endings were rarely loud. Project Phoenix died in silence, in flooded corridors, in fried circuits, in blacked-out monitors, in lifeless pods drifting in dark water. By the time emergency systems stabilized, Vought executives were already running, not toward solutions, toward exits, private jets, shell corporations, burner identities. The factory that promised immortality had vanished overnight, and no one could explain how. Eric Draven staggered out of sublevel 80 through a maintenance shaft with Butcher's team. Every step felt heavier than the last. His regeneration barely whispered now. Cuts closed slowly. Bones took seconds longer to knit. His body was reaching a limit, a hard one. But his eyes were calm. The crow remained on his shoulder, faithful, silent, witness. They emerged into pre-dawn air several blocks from Vought Tower. Sirens wailed in the distance. Military helicopters roared overhead. But the city felt different. Not peaceful, not healed, but altered. Broke the silence first. "You did it." Eric shook his head. "I stopped something." Frenchie nodded slowly. "Sometimes that's all anyone can do." Huey hesitated. "What happens to you now?" Eric looked toward the horizon. "I keep walking." Butcher studied him. "You could disappear. Plenty of places." Eric met his eyes. "If I disappear, they rebuild." Butcher exhaled through his nose. "Yeah, figures." They stood there for a moment. No speeches, no hugs, no promises. Then Eric turned and walked into the ruined city, alone, except for the crow. Homelander learned about Project Phoenix from a panicking executive who didn't finish the sentence. Heat vision cut him in half mid-word. Homelander floated in the executive suite, surrounded by blood and shattered glass. "They took my future," Homelander whispered. Not screamed, not raged, whispered. For the first time, Homelander felt something worse than fear.
limitation. No resurrection army, no replacements, no safety net. If he died, that was it. The realization hollowed him. In hollow things break. Across the country, stories spread, not just about Homelander bleeding, not just about Vought facilities collapsing, but about a figure who appeared in the worst places, who killed monsters, who protected the forgotten, who never stayed. The Crow. No manifesto, no organization, no demands, just consequence. Criminal networks adapted, soups became more cautious, some stopped entirely. Not out of morality, out of fear. In fear, for once, was pointed in the right direction. Eric's body continued to weaken, slowly, imperceptibly. Each resurrection took more than it gave back. He felt it when he stood too fast, when wounds lingered, when exhaustion crept in. But he also felt something else, purpose, no longer fueled solely by vengeance, but by choice. He was not trapped in his mission. He had chosen it. Every night, every kill, every act of protection. Choice gave meaning to suffering. It did not erase pain, but it shaped it.
Weeks later, Eric stood on a rooftop in Chicago. Below, a group of human traffickers were unloading girls from a truck. Soups as guards. Same story, different city. Eric inhaled. The crow spread its wings. Eric stepped forward. Because the world was still broken. Because monsters still existed. Because it couldn't rain all the time. Homelander never challenged Eric again. Not publicly, not privately. He hunted rebels, executed criminals, tightened his grip. But every time a shadow moved wrong, every time a feather drifted across a rooftop, Homelander remembered. Gods weren't supposed to remember, but he did. Eric Draven became something new. Not a savior, not a king, not a god. A constant, a walking reminder that power without conscience would always be hunted. That systems built on suffering could be wounded. That even in a world designed to manufacture monsters, a man who refused to stay dead could still choose to be human. The Crow did not fix the world. He did not cleanse it. He did not redeem it. He simply made it harder to be evil. And sometimes, that was enough. Eric Draven did not conquer the boys' universe. He reshaped its gravity. Vought lost its dream of endless gods. Homelander lost his illusion of invincibility. The public lost its blind faith. What remained was uncertainty, and uncertainty was dangerous, but also fertile. In that uncertainty, people began resisting, not loudly, not heroically, quietly, which was how real change always started. Eric remained a shadow between worlds, a soul powered by borrowed time and chosen purpose. His future was not endless, but it was meaningful. Somewhere, someday, his flame would go out. He knew that, accepted it. Until then, he would walk, he would hunt, he would protect. Not because he was destined to, not because a god commanded it, but because he chose to. And in a universe ruled by monsters who believed they were inevitable, choice was the most terrifying power of all. More stories await.